не знаю, что делать с фамилией, мне нужно кому-нибудь из них ходить на уши, потому что они меня словят меня. Они будут меня спрашивать. Нам тут сейчас выправляют.
Get it published. And then we'll have time for questions. My name is Jehan Jones-Radgowski, and I work at the U.S. Embassy in the Cultural Affairs section, and I've also written a couple of books, 4 of which have been published. Those are all for children. And then I've written a couple of novels that I'm editing and working on and hoping to get published. Okay, so on your journey, you will need passengers. We're going to talk about what kind of writer and author will you be, the vehicle, how are you going to get to your publication destination, self-publishing, traditional publishing, and your cargo. What do you need to take to make this successful? What do you need to take in your car on your journey to become a published author? All right, passengers. So these are the basic types of writer, author you can become. We're all writers because you've all written something in your life. You're all writers. And most people say, to become an author, you need to be a published writer. I think that also could be writing on a blog. Once you share your work with the rest of the world, then you become an author. So it doesn't have to be published in a book you can buy online or get in a library. Once you jump from keeping it to yourself in your notebook to sharing it with someone, you're an author. An author illustrator is someone who writes their own books and illustrates them. So you may write books for children, but you might not feel comfortable drawing the pictures. You may actually feel comfortable drawing the pictures, and you can be an author illustrator. Most publishers don't want you to be an amateur illustrator. They want you to be someone who's actually competent and understand illustration. But you can find books that are illustrated where you could say, I could have done that. So I mean, I've seen illustrated books that are circles and squares, and other ones that are like amazing, illustration. Which the circle and square is also amazing, but it's a different type. And there are also author illustrators for adult books. It's not just for children. There are graphic novels, which are like comic books for adults, and for older adolescents. You also have a ghostwriter. Ghostwriter means you wrote the book, but you won't have your name on the cover. You'll get paid for writing the book, but you don't get the credit for writing the book. So if you're a ghostwriter, you'll get paid, but you won't be able to find the book you wrote in the library. And a lot of famous authors don't write all their books. We think they write them, but they don't have time because they're busy being famous. And so they have ghostwriters who they say, hey, write my romance novel in the same format as my other 50 romance novels, and I'll pay you. And then that person gets paid, but it still says famous author wrote this.
totally legal. You sign a contract. You're not allowed to claim any additional money later or want to be noted in a magazine that you wrote this book, but you get paid to do it. And then there's work for hire, and I've done that. You have your name on the cover. You've written the book. If you go to the Library of Congress in America, for example, you can find that book you wrote. You can look yourself up. You wrote the book. It was published in your name. But the publishing company came to you and said, will you write this book for us? You didn't necessarily have the idea yourself. They might say, can you write us a book about the Russian food in Russia? Because we've seen on your blog that you write about food and you're a culinary genius. Or can you write a book about living in Russia as an immigrant from another country? And this is how we want you to write it. This is the due date, and you write it, but you're work for hire, which means you get paid for doing that book. If they translate it into French, you don't get extra money. If they make a movie about it, you won't get extra money. You will get paid for the work you did when they hired you, but you don't have the rights to the book. So when I had my first contract for work for hire, I sent it to my brother-in-law, who's an agent in Hollywood, and he does actresses. But he said, oh, don't sign this. You'll never make any money in the future. And we talked about it. Well, actually, that's the whole point of this. If I want to get this book published with them, then I won't be able to get money in the future. And they use me later for other works for hire. So I would never do work for hire for my own independent thought that I came up myself, that I've been working on, like my novels or like my children. Don't tell my children I said that. But they're like my babies because I created them and I came up with the idea. So I want to get paid if they can translate it into Russian or French. If there's a movie made out of it, I should get paid. I should get paid royalties for the rest of my life for that book. But the work for hire, I won't get paid, and I understand why. I was backwards. All right, next. Your vehicle for publishing. So there's more than two, but I'm just going to talk about these two. There's self-publishing and traditional publishing. Of course, now we have hybrid mixes. You have very small publishing companies that are a little bit self-published and a little bit traditional. But let's just do these two main differences. In the past, I would say, maybe 20 years ago, self-publishing was frowned upon. Maybe people thought you self-publish when you can't make it in the real world. But self-publishing has taken off, and people, this can be a reliable stream of income. It can be a reliable way to be an author, but it also takes work. So if you're self-published, you have more control. I have a friend who had a book, and she was about to sign a contract, and they wanted her to change so much in her book, she felt like it was no longer her book. And they said, well, we like your overall theme, but I think one of her characters had a special heart condition, which she has. And they said, that's extra. We don't want that in there. And she felt like the entire story was based on that heart condition. And they didn't want her to talk about that. So she ended up self-publishing. And she made a lot of money, wrote a lot of books, and then started her own self-publishing company. I have another, my friend whose mom immigrated to America from West Africa. And she wrote her story of living in West Africa, immigrating to America, feeling snow for the first time, living among Americans, how it was adapting to a new culture. And she wrote this book. I bought it, my mom bought it, maybe 10 other people bought it. And that's what she wanted. She didn't necessarily want the entire world to read it. She wanted to write a book about her life, and she wanted her children's children to have in their hands, you know, the one day when she's no longer here, they can read about her life in Africa before she moved to America. And that's what self-publishing gave her that opportunity. A big publisher might not have wanted to publish her book, but it's published. She has it, and people can buy it because she went through that effort. So you have to ask yourself, what's your goal? I think self-publishing authors have to do more work. If you're going to self-publish, you need to have great grammar and editing skills because you don't have that editor to do the final check for you, or you have to pay somebody to do that for you. So, for example, I know I make mistakes in grammar all the time. Self-publishing would be difficult for me because I don't have time to kind of do that on my own. I would want someone else to do it for me, to do the editing, and to come back to me and say, look at these mistakes, fix them. But I know people who write flawlessly. The first time they write, it's all correct. And they could do this method. Self-publishing, the process is quicker. You could write a book this weekend and publish it on Monday, technically. You could go online,
find the right resources and publish your book. You know, if you have a friend who does cover design, it can help you. If you know a person who has a bookstore, you can sell your books at their bookstore. It takes a lot of work if you want to make money as a self-published author, but you can do it. On the other hand, traditional publishing. So basically that means there's big giant firms who sell books. That's all they've been doing for decades and decades. And they have smaller companies that work for them that do different markets, but they basically publish books. And so in order to get into that realm, you have to go through an agent. It's really hard to have a publishing company publish your books without an agent. They usually don't see on agents as authors. They don't want to talk to you, they don't have time. Occasionally, you may know someone who knows someone and you may be able to get in without having an agent, or you may go to a conference. You may be in an elevator one random day. This happened to somebody and someone will say, oh, I'm a publisher at Random House, and you could pitch your idea to them. That's probably going to happen to 0.0.0.05% of us in the world. You know, so most people won't have that opportunity. Most people, if you want to be traditionally published, you have to find an agent. Agent basically is a person who says, I found you, you know, you found them, but technically they say, I found you, so for the rest of your career, I get a percentage of all the money you make. Because I'm going to make sure every book you write gets to the right publishing company. I'm going to get you the best deal. I'm going to make sure that if a movie's made out of your book, you get paid all your royalties. I'm going to watch you for the rest of your life, and we're going to have this union, and we're together. So just like a marriage, you find the right agent. That's the best thing ever, right? Or you don't have to get married, but as an example, or a significant other. But if you have a wrong agent for the rest of your life, that's not a good thing. So you have to take time finding the right agent, signing the contract that makes sense. Sometimes I've heard of people who sign a contract and they don't get out of it because they can't, because it's legally binding for so many years. Then they find another agent. I like that person more, but I'm still with this agent. So they end up working with both agents and have to pay both of them a percentage of their money of the books. So signing with an agent is a big deal. Most agents accept query letters. A query letter is your one page about your book. You have like 3 paragraphs. You describe your book, you say why you want to work with that agent, and if you have information about yourself that's important, you talk about it. So you wrote a book about Russia and Russian relations with a certain country, and you've been to that other country, and you're Russian. Or you wrote a book for children about traveling overseas, and you've traveled overseas, and you went to a job. And you work at a place with children, or you're a teacher, or whatever. You put that in there. You don't put things that have nothing at all to do with your book. But if you wrote a book about a murder mystery where the person murdered was a famous chef, and you yourself worked for a famous chef, excuse me, that would be something to note in your query letter. So once you send your query letter to the agent who you've selected based on the fact that you think this agent would want to represent you, because agents will say, I'm looking for people who are writing science fiction. So if you're writing romance, don't write to that agent. They'll say, I'm looking for funny narratives and a first person written by female, with a female lead. You know, so if you wrote a sad, depressing book written by in a lead of a man, not you're a man, but your characters are men, and the person's already said, I want funny, you know, whatever, teenage love story, the main characters are women or something, you wouldn't go to that agent. You pick an agent based on what you think they'll like, based on what they've said in interviews, on their websites, etc. So you write your query letter, you send it to an agent, the agent says, I like this. They email you back and say, send me your next 15 pages or your whole book, and then they get back to you. So hopefully they get back to you and say, I love this, I want to sign you, give me a call, let's talk. A lot of times they get back to you and say, this won't work for me, it's not strong enough, I don't like it, whatever. And then you go on to the next one. And you can't be discouraged because there are lots of people, every single like really important writer, like for example, J.K. Rowling received, you know, 20 or 30 rejections. And people are like, why would anyone want to read about a wizard, a little boy wizard? Like, you know, people were rejecting her. She kept sending to new agents. So you find your agent, Once you find your agent, which could take you a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 months, but you find your agent, then your agent takes your book and shops it to editors at publishing houses. So your editor, your best hope is that lots of publishing companies like your book, and then they have a war pretty much about buying your book. And that's assuming you want your book read by lots of people and you want to make lots of money on your book. The more publishers who want your book, the higher they'll pay for your book because everyone wants that book. Your editor signs with you, you're happy, the editor then works with you on the book to make it a little bit better. And then after that,
write good books, no matter what they are. I think you have to test the water for yourself. But it may be hard to convince your publisher, hey, I know I've done 4 books for you, all for kids, on vampires and werewolves, but I really want to write an adult crime novel right now. And they may say, you're doing so well with the werewolf books, let's just do another werewolf book. And so you may have to find a new publisher. All right, so the easiest part, how do you write your novel? Yeah, you have to write it. I mean, basically, if you want to be a professional basketball player, you're not going to just sit down and dream about playing basketball. You're going to play basketball every day. You're going to run. You're going to practice your dribbling. You're going to do whatever it is you do to play basketball. And same thing with writing a novel or writing a book. You have the ideas in your brain. You have dreams about these ideas. You think about the ideas. But you have to put them down on paper. I used to carry a laptop with me everywhere I go because I would always write, like when I was waiting at the dentist or waiting for an appointment, or even in the grocery store. If I was about to go in the grocery store and I had an idea, I would just go back to the car and start writing. I don't do that as much now. I also saw a chiropractor in those days because I carried too much stuff around. But I carry a notebook everywhere I go because I always want to have that chance to take notes when I think of things. I've had people say, "How do you come up with ideas?" Well, through lots of ways. I come up with ideas by listening to people talk. When I was a kid, my mom, I thought she was very nosy. Maybe she still is nosy, but she would just watch people. Like, when we go to restaurants, she would spend the whole time watching people. Like, watching them and listening to them. And now I kind of do that, but not as obvious as my mom was. But it's helpful to see interactions. And, one time, sometimes I write books just based on something I hear someone say, or short stories. I hear someone say, one time I was in an ice cream shop, and this girl walked in and was like, hashtag, I'm getting vanilla ice cream, hashtag sprinkles. She just kept saying hashtag. And I was like, that's so weird. Then I wrote a short story about an alien who only knew about Twitter. And he didn't know, we didn't talk. This is before Twitter became 240 characters or whatever it's now, 280. He thought everyone talked in these hashtag short sentences. And so the alien comes to Earth and he gets a human body and he speaks in hashtags. And people are like, what is wrong with you? But there's all these funny things that happen with the alien, all because he only knew about Twitter. And I got that idea from listening to the girl in this ice cream shop. And sometimes I hear people talking, and I think, wow, that sounds like my character. Or I see a picture in a magazine, and I think, this looks just like the girl in my dream for my book. And I cut her picture out, and I put it in my book. I don't have to go for permission. She's some kind of actor or something like that, actress. But I keep it in a book, and I think about my book. I think about this person is saying this word, and I make a diagram and put another picture. This is what her mom would look like, and this is what her love interest looks like. And so I keep these thoughts because they help me write my novel. Some people say, listen to music. You have to find what's best for you. I've tried music, and sometimes it works. People say you have to write in a busy cafe. You have to go to the same coffee shop and write. I've tried that. I get distracted by coffee shops because I want to know what everyone's doing and look at them. And I can't go to a coffee shop and cover my ears because I feel stupid. I don't know. I don't get it. People love it. People love going around active people and writing their book. Personally, I need to either be in an active place observing people and taking notes about them and how they walk and how they talk and how they argue in public with each other, or I need to be at home writing by myself. Some people say write your book every single day, like at the same time, every time you wake up, or every night before you go to bed, but you have to find time to write. And I know people say I don't have time to write, I'm so busy, I don't have time to write. I'm a student, or I'm a parent, or I work a full-time job, and I take care of my cousin, whatever. But you have time to look at TV sometimes. I know I look at Netflix, and I look at it in Russian to make myself feel like I'm not just watching Netflix. But I'm still looking at Netflix when I could be writing, So take the time to write. Until they discover software to plug to our head and take all our thoughts and write it on a sheet of paper for us, which is scary but also would be effective, you have to write it yourself. You could also do talk to text. You could speak your book. You can record yourself. There are different applications for just talking out loud, and that will type everything you say. You have to go and check it and make sure it said what you actually said. But if you can't, or you don't want to write, you can write into your phone. You could just take a walk and just start talking. And everyone talks to these people on the phone now, so nobody would think you're crazy. So it used to be that if you were walking around talking, people would walk away from you. But now it's like, oh, they're on the phone with somebody. That's so rude. But you can just talk to yourself in the car, on the train, while you're walking. Also, you need to have people to help you along the way. You have to have a critique group. I think you have to have someone, at least one person, if not multiple people, to bounce your ideas off. Don't be afraid they're going to steal your ideas. If you're afraid of that, that's the wrong kind of person to talk to. Don't show it to your significant other, your boyfriend, your mom, your husband, because they're going to love it regardless, for the most part. I showed my first novel to my husband, and he was like, on the first page, you didn't use your commas right. And I was like, no, that's not why I gave it to you. And I was like,
that was all the feedback he gave me after having the book for like 2 weeks was, I noticed on the first page you used you comma spliced, and you didn't put your commas correctly. It's like, yeah, no, you're never going to critique my books again. You need to have someone, he's like, everything else was great. I'm like, no, it wasn't. You want someone to read it and say, you know what? This makes a lot of sense to me, but too many characters, or not enough characters, or too much dialogue, or not enough dialogue. I told the younger group that I work with, that one of my first books is kidnapping in it. And the kidnapping scene happens in the middle of the book. And all my critique partners said, start with the kidnapping scene. Your book's too slow. It starts off too slow. Start with the kidnapping scene. I was like, no, I can't. Because if I start the kidnapping, you won't really know why she was kidnapped. I want to show her life and then have the kidnapping. I'm like, no, start with the kidnapping. And then I got my book, I wrote my query letter, and like 8 different agents said they wanted to read it, which is like, that is like an amazing experience when you get an email after having tons of emails saying, sorry, having loved your query letter, want to read your book. And they all came back and said, your book's too slow. It starts too slow. Think about changing it to start at the kidnapping. I was like, I don't know, if I only listen to my critique partners. So find someone to write with. Find someone to read over your stuff and to bounce ideas off. And also, take a class if you can. Take a writing class. There are online classes, there are in-person classes. Some people write outline, some people just free write. Some people find it's great to have like different formats. I'm doing a writing class for younger people, younger students, and we talked last week about how to have your inciting element event, like how to have your book start with something that gets the reader's attention, because if you don't grab the reader on the first page, you don't have them. They're not going to buy your book. And if they bought it by accident, they're not going to finish reading it. You have to grab them on the very first page. I went to a writer's conference once, and the agents sat at a panel, and they read the first 500 words of someone's book. And as soon as one agent raised their hand, it meant I would start reading now. And some of them stopped reading after like 2 or 3 lines of the book. And we're all thinking, but how can you do that? It's probably an amazing book. But they get 100 different people emailing them every week, read my book. It's amazing. If you can't get them hooked on the first 500 words, they're not going to read your query, they're not going to read your first 5 pages, they're not going to buy your book or represent you to get your book purchased. This could take us a whole year of discussion, how to write a novel, but start with your ideas, figure out what you want to write. Do you want to write for children, for teenagers, for adults? Do you want to write for adults? Do you want to write romance, mystery, science fiction, contemporary? Do you want to write historical books, historical romance, or historical mysteries? What are you passionate about? Most people say write what you know. Like if you don't know anything about art, paintings and drawing and art, don't write a book about a mystery where someone steals artwork. Like write that book if you know about art. If you like riding horses and you've been riding horses your whole life, your book should have a component about horses, not a book about how to ride a horse, but a book about someone who solves a murder, and that person happens to be, a equestrian sport, or someone who's in horseback riding, or someone who the murder happens at the horse farm next door. Because you can tell when you read a book if the person's details show they know what they're talking about, if they just Googled it. They just like quickly was like, okay, Google horse, all right, 4 legs, tail, got it. You have to know more information about a subject to be able to write and make someone want to read your work. And, all right, so this is the end, but I'm happy to answer questions. I just put a couple of resources that I think work. If you are going to write for children, you should definitely check out SCEWI's website. They have writing conferences in Europe. They have them every 2 years, and the next one's going to be in Germany in 2021. So they have writing groups all over the world, but they don't have one in Russia yet. Before I came here, I tried to find one, and they don't have one here yet. But if enough people say they want to join, they could probably form a writing group here. And it's great to be a part of an online community, even if you're not part of an in-person community for writers. I like Joanna Penn's website, The Creative Pen. She also has a podcast. She is a self-published author who is like, I don't know, I think she's a millionaire. Not that you have to make money to be a writer, but if you write, maybe you want to make money as a writer. And she has just great resources. She's written lots of books on how to write, and she's got great resources on what to do. Like,
if you do write your book and you're self-published, sometimes if you go with Amazon or some big companies, you can only sell your books through Amazon. Like, there are different rules. Even if you self-publish, you sometimes lose control if you use certain websites. So you have to figure out, what's the best way to self-publish. And she'll give you those tips on her website. K.M. Weiland also is another writer who I really like. She has a great podcast, the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast, and she has a website, great resource, and she's written lots of books on writing. And if you want to do conferences, I would go to a conference. A writer's conference is a great way to meet other writers, to open your eyes to writing. Usually conferences are 2 to 3 days, and they usually have a day full of different meetings and seminars with with authors, with editors, with agents, panels, lunches and dinners. They go from pretty decently priced to super expensive, so obviously it's based on budget. And then there are residencies. You could just pay to go somewhere where you get some classes in the morning and you write all afternoon. I did one in Switzerland when I lived in Germany. It was really great. We stayed in really tiny hostel rooms because in Switzerland everything's expensive. But it was good because I had 3 days where I wrote nonstop, and it was nice to be around other writers because I was compelled to write and not look at Netflix, because we were all at the table writing on our own, not together, in different parts of the hotel. We were all writing, and it was such a great experience to write with other writers. So check out residencies if you can. That's a website, Poets and Writers. I don't know any of the Russian websites, but I'm sure they exist. So if I can find them, maybe we could put links up on the website or something about where resources are Russian specific in Russian here in Moscow. So I'm happy to take questions you have about writing, the writing process. I know at one point I was going to take this in the direction of some of the books I've written have been about African American history, and since February is African American History Month in America, I was going to talk a little bit about that, but I think that's a different discussion, and I'm happy to cover that as well if you came here with a question about that. Otherwise, happy to answer your questions about my presentation. Yes?
What is your first story was about? I mean, first story that you write maybe in school and maybe when you were in childhood?
Yes, that's a great question. So, when I was in elementary school, which for us is grade age 5 to like age 9, I was in this competition called Young Authors Competition, and it's very small in my school. But we all wrote books and we competed against each other in school. So luckily, because we did that, I kept those books and I had them. And I went home once and I took all of them and read them. And the first story I ever wrote was in the first grade about a family, and I wrote from the dog's perspective how the dog lived with the family, and how the dog saw the baby as a mortal enemy, and how the dog, interacted with the family, and how the dog planned to take over the world, which is crazy because then there was a cartoon later on called Family Guy, which was about a dog who wants to take over the world, who works with a baby. I don't know if they're enemies or not, but I was like, I wrote this when I was 6 years old, and there was like a cartoon made 10 years later about the same thing. Obviously, they didn't steal my idea because, all dogs and babies are enemies in the sense that they're, a baby can replace a dog, whatever. But it was just like, I saw it and I was like, I wrote this a long time ago. I forgot about this. So I have a couple of those short books I wrote. The book that I wrote a book almost 9 years ago. I started writing seriously. And when I went to my first writers conference, just as a side note, I remember feeling like when I got to the conference, people were going to say, quit your job. You're a writer. All you need to do is write. Stop wasting your time at your job. And every single person said, don't quit your job. This takes so long. You are not going to make any money as a writer, no matter what you think, no matter how great your story is. Do not quit your job. And I was like, no, I came here to be inspired. Tomorrow I'm going to be free and just write. But it was funny, and they all said it takes 10 years, at least 10 years to become successful in writing. From when you first start writing to when you become successful. And I remember thinking, it's not going to take me 10 years. In 1 year, I'm going to have a book published, and I'm going to have a movie off that book, and then I'm going to write my second book. And it's almost been 10 years, so that means next year, I'm going to become a famous author. But it's funny because it does take a long time. So my first serious novel I wrote was about happen. It's a Civil War soldier comes back to kids in high school, and there's like devil comes in. It's all kind of things that happen. And I had a couple agents tell me there's just too much going on in your book. So I put that aside. But one day I want to pick it up again and kind of fix it and make it a book that doesn't feel like there's too much going on in it. Yes.
What journal are you writing?
What journal?
Are you writing?
Genre, yes. I was like, it's a journal, so that's bounds, paper journal. So, for my young adult books, my books for like teenagers, mostly I write fantasy, and I have some contemporary stuff I'm writing. But I'm also writing middle grade, so I'm not following the traditional stick in one genre. And I also write picture books, and I also write chapter books. So we're going to see if I can break that stereotype, because you can only do one. The only adult book I've ever really worked on has been contemporary issues. So we'll see. But I write mostly for kids, fantasy, undiscovered worlds at the bottom of the ocean, vampires and ghosts and different things coming back alive, and people seeing things that adults can't see, and solving mysteries that adults don't know exist. And I also wrote the contemporary novel where there's a kidnapping. It's an international, kids are in an international school. One of the kids is kidnapped, and it basically is tied to her mom's job and what she's doing. And some people don't like something the U.S. is doing, and she gets kidnapped, and that's the whole story of her getting kind of relief from the kidnappers and figuring out what's happening. And so that's contemporary. Sure.
Okay, thank you for coming and sharing your experience. My question, you catch your inspiration, you know what your book will be about. How do you start? How do you decide which side do you start? It's coming immediately, or do you think along about it?
Right. So, two parts of that question. So, how do we come up with our ideas, and do the ideas kind of flow out of us or flow out of me? So, there's this thing called writer's block. And I sometimes feel like, well, I'll never have writer's block because I never have enough time to have writer's block. Because I'm always, I need to find like 15 minutes in a day to sit down and write. And so, it's just like people who have food can say, oh, I don't want to eat this or that. I don't know what I want to eat for dinner. But if you're really poor, you eat whatever's in the house for dinner. You would eat whatever you had to eat for dinner. So I feel like sometimes I won't have writer's block because I always never have time to write. Then I moved to Russia and I didn't have a job, and I was supposed to write every day, and then I didn't write at all. I kept making excuses. I had to go to a coffee shop, or I had to go to a new museum, or I had to do this, and I realized that when I had all the time in the world to write, I didn't write. But when I had no time to write, I wrote at night and stayed up and didn't sleep. So I think you have to be dedicated and diligent. You have to say, I'm going to write. And some people say, even if I don't know what I'm going to write, I sit down every day at 5 o'clock or whatever with my computer, sit there for 30 minutes, even if I don't know what I'm going to write. Some people say free write. Just give yourself a subject. Find a prompt, a writing prompt. And even if you're not going to write about this thing, there are writing prompt websites that give you, like in the kids group read last week, I told them, you open the refrigerator and you look inside, you're hungry, but instead you see green little creatures in a new world and purple mountains, and they say close the door or come inside, and what do? And so they wrote stories about going in the refrigerator and communicating with these little creatures, and some of them got stuck inside the refrigerator, some of them came back out. So that was a writing prompt. None of them were prepared to write a story about traveling in a refrigerator, meeting creatures, but I gave them a prompt, and they all wrote because they knew they had to write in their 10 minutes that I gave them to write. So if you can have a writing prompt. I have a friend that's published lots of books, and I once said to him, how do I write a novel and work on my novel? And he said, don't write a novel, write a short story. Write short stories because you practice the beginning, the middle, and the end. A lot of people have a lot of great ideas for novels. They can't write the middle. They know the beginning, they know how it ends, but they can't write the middle 30,000 words or 50,000 words. So if you write for adults, you might write 100,000 words. If you write for teenagers, it might be 50,000 words or 60,000. So you have to be able to write the middle. So So if you write short stories, which can just be 10 pages long or however long, you know how to write the beginning, the middle, and the end. You know how to conclude your thoughts. So start with short stories and come up with a topic or a theme. I keep a notebook of stuff, and once I didn't know what to write next, and I read my ideas off to my sister, and I said, hey, here are the things I think I might want to write about. What would you want to read and listen to? And she said, yeah, start on that book. The second idea you told me. That sounds like a good idea. And so I worked on that idea instead of some of the other ones that I wanted, I thought about maybe working on it. So that goes back to having the writing group, having a writing mentor, the writing friend, having somebody that every Wednesday you go get coffee with, at lunchtime, and you write. Or, going for a walk. Some people say walking helps them, exercising helps them think. And so after they've gone for a 10-minute walk, they have ideas and they can sit down and write. I also keep a notebook by my bedside because sometimes I have really weird dreams, and if I wake up in the middle of the dream, I'll remember them, and I'll wake up and I'll write it down, because if I don't know what I dreamed about in the morning. Sometimes I wake up and I look and I'm like, what in the world is this? Like, what did I write down? Purple dog, cucumber, what is this? Like, what did that mean? Other times I'm like, oh, that was a great idea. I mean, all these different things that happened in my dream, I can see how I could write this out. I also like to visualize what I'm going to write, like a movie's playing in my head. I think it's because I grew up when we probably watched more movies when we were kids than we actually read books at a certain point. So I always see the movie running in my head, my book, and my ideas and my thoughts. And then I write down. And my sister's husband, who's an agent for Hollywood, he was like, one of my ideas, he said, you should write that as a screenplay. And it was an idea that involves, like, this is world, the flip side of our world, and it's scary, and there's all these things that happen. And he was like, you should write that as a screenplay. You should write that as a screenplay. And I never did. And then I saw Netflix had a show out where I was like, oh, it's not the same thing, but it's very similar. Like, there's this, I forgot the name of it, but they're kids, and there's like this whole world is happening with demigods and all this scary stuff is happening, like, on the other side of, like, life. But it's in the same place they live, and it's like, that's what I was doing in my dream, that I was writing. So, that was a long answer to your question, but hopefully you got something out of that. I talk way too much, yes.
What sites allow you to print books without publishing houses?
That's a great question.
Without.
I don't have
In
the
Russia,
answer. I don't have the
answer.
answer in my head for that. There are, I would go to Joanna Penn, the creativepen.com's website. There are companies that you have your book written, you can go to them and they can print it for you, print on demand. You want 10 copies of your book, you pay for 10 copies. They ship them to your house, and then you can give those out or sell those books. There are also companies you have to be careful who will say, give me, $500 or whatever, and we'll publish your book for you, or even more money, and they're actually not a real publishing company. So I would say, if you're self-publishing, make sure you're paying for the publication of your book, and you want to, but don't go to a publisher who says, we're a publisher, we'll publish it for you, but first you have to pay us a fee. You shouldn't have to pay to get your book published if it's not self-publishing. If they're an actual publishing company, they should be able to afford to publish your book. I mean, that's what publishers do. They publish your book on the risk that everyone at the publishing company thinks this is a great idea. The agent thinks it's a great idea. They believe the clientele, the people who have money, will buy the book, and then they get paid back. You get an advance. I've never heard anybody tell me what their advance is, but you get an advance, and you get that money, and if you sign the contract the right way, you don't have to pay it back if your book doesn't sell out. A lot of contracts are written like that. Some contracts say, if you don't sell this many books, you owe us the advance back, which is, scary if you spent the money already. But most places say you can keep the advance, and we think you will make even more money off this book. So you'll get royalties, you'll get a % of the sale for the rest of your book's life, and you get to keep the advance you receive for publishing the book. Sure.
When you already have an idea of a book, do you make any kind of research, marketing, if somebody has already written something like that?
That's a good idea. I know I wrote a book, and my title the Kid in the Gray Pajamas, or what's the movie where it's a Holocaust movie, and I was like, I didn't even know that movie existed at that time, or the book. And I read the book and the movie, and I was like, oh, I have to change my title, because I was not trying to associate my book and change it. This is an amazing book and an amazing story, and I was not trying to steal from them. So it's good to kind of do some research. What you have to understand is that a lot of people are writing right now may have something slightly similar. They're not going to have your same book. So I wouldn't say, I'm not going to write my book because someone's already written a love story with a Russian and a German during the war. Like, I'm not going to write that because it's already been told. No, you're going to tell it differently. You write your story, it's in your heart. No one else is going to write that. It's the same way you wrote it. But yes, looking at marketing, if you're going to self-publish, you're going to have to market your book yourself for the most part. If you work with a traditional publisher, they have a marketing team. I know some people tell me, even though they have a marketing team, I still have to do calls myself. I really want my book to sell, especially when you're a first-time writer. Bookstores might not automatically buy your book, or you might not automatically get your book listed out there. You can't get on the bestseller list if people don't know your book exists. So sometimes you do have to do some marketing if you're traditionally published, but for the most part, unless you're self-publishing, you don't need to worry about marketing. You don't need to spend lots of time developing your website before your book is finished. Write your book and write it perfectly. It's going to have some mistakes, but write it. Write 3 or 4 different versions. Find a friend who has a literary mindset to read it for you. You can also swap books. I've done this before. I personally believe now, for me, I'd rather know the person who's working on my book. But I've met people on Facebook who say, I have a picture book for this age group on this topic. I want to swap. And then someone says, oh, I have this. And they send each other emails and share their book, and they critique it. Kind of weird, kind of dangerous because you don't know the person. But sometimes it's helpful. I did that with a stranger. We swapped our young adult books, and I felt like his characters would use profanity in some instances and not in others. And his character was a boy in high school, and he had a sexual experience with a girl, but the book didn't talk about it at all. It just was really weird, but other times he would talk about things. So I was like, hey, if I were you, I would do this and that. And he said, well, you're trying to make my book pornography, and you're trying to make my book this. I only use curse words 5 times in my book on purpose. And I was like, yeah, but this person gets in a car accident, they've been dropping F-bombs through the whole book, and now you said darn. Like, I just don't think that doesn't feel realistic to me. So he got really mad at me, and I was like, I think if he knew me, he would know I'm not trying to make his book pornographic. But because he didn't know me, and we were emailing each other back and forth from Facebook, that I met him on Facebook, it was really weird. So I tend to now prefer to only critique someone who knows me, who I can sit down with and say, hey, I love this. These are the things I didn't like about it. And they can say to me, hey, I love this, but the ending is kind of weird, or it feels rushed. And I was like, you're right, I was rushed at the end. Somebody who we can talk to and I can have a relationship with. But some people really love anonymous critique. They love not meeting people, but just sending their stuff to them, and they get comments back, and they don't have to worry about the ties of seeing that person again or ever meeting them ever again, because they never knew them in the first place, and they will never know them in the future. They just got their information for their book. So find out what works best for you is my tip.
Where can I see your book?
So I should have bought them tonight. Bought them last time. I can bring them by the American Center. I mean, I'm not here to anybody to go out and buy my books. That's not why I'm here. But they're online. If you search my name, you can find them online. Or I'll bring copies by here and leave them here, and then you can read them here. Yeah. Or yeah, because I don't have that many copies left at home. But
Thank you very much for your glorious and informative presentation. And I would like to ask how the Amazon publication works like.
okay, so I haven't self-published on Amazon, but from what I understand, you write your book, and there are 2 different ways you can do on Amazon, where you can agree to certain contract rules, and you can agree that only Amazon can sell your book, and then they will put it in a different kind of rotation. Then if you say, I'm going to put my book on Amazon, and I'm also going to put it on other websites. But the Amazon has an author, Central, I think so, Amazon Author Central. You go on that, and they give all the details. And they have an app you can download and you use it and you upload everything into that, and then they take your book and they'll publish it for you. And then you get a percentage of the sale. I mean, when you self-publish, the majority of the money comes back to you, which is what a lot of people like. You don't split it with the agent and the editor, you don't pay anybody else any fees, you just get the money yourself. But you also have to deal with the fact, the issues of self-publishing. So it's good and bad. As far as exact details for Amazon, I don't know. I've never done any research on it, but I know they have a website that lays everything out.
How did it happen that you start writing?
So I've always liked telling stories. I just used to make up stuff. And when I was a kid, when I learned there was something called storytelling, I prefer to say, when someone said, "You told a lie," I'm like, "No, I was telling a story." You believe me? I would just make up stuff, and people, when they believe me, I would just get so excited, and I would say more things, and it was just amazing. And I made up stories at school, and kids would believe me, and then one day I learned if I wrote it down, I wouldn't get in trouble because it was a story. It was no longer me lying; it was a story. So that's how I got started. I love telling stories, love entertaining. When I was in middle school, high school, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have social media. My friends we had three-way, you probably have that here, where one of my friends would have the ability to call two people, talk on the phone, and then another friend had three-way, so we'd all be on the phone. And I would tell stories about the boys we liked and how we would get stuck in the gym with them, or how we find out they really liked us too. I would tell these crazy stories about going to the mall and everyone getting locked in the mall, and then discovering that somebody you had a crush on had a crush on you, or embarrassing the bully. And, I would just make up stories, and they would just listen to me because we didn't have social media, and we would, it would be like entertainment. We'd also make movies. I don't know what they do. I don't know what kids do now, but we didn't have any social media, so we made up stuff. So I was always making up stuff my whole entire life. And then one day I was like, I want to be a writer, and I started writing those things down that I was making up. And how I became a work for hire, I sent a book to the publisher, and they came back months later and said, "No, that doesn't work for us." And then a couple months later, they said, "Hey, we remember you. You sent us something. Would you like to write this for us?" And that's how we started. And the next couple months later, I got another request: write this and write that, and write this. So that's how I met them.
From your point of view, in USA, what is the top selling stories? What are they about?
That's a great question. So again, I write for children, so I haven't paid much attention to the adult market. But I would say, memoirs always are in the U.S. and obviously we can't write that because we have to be somebody famous. You could be not famous or a memoir, but fantasy is still pretty big. They went through a period in America where paranormal romance, everyone was writing about vampires and werewolves, and then everyone was writing about ghosts, and then everyone started writing contemporary pieces about people who had cancer and were dying, but then would fall in love with someone, and then too bad I have cancer, or when the kid would die in the end, and you would see, it was all these heart-wrenching stories about love and death, and then the next cycle became dystopian literature. Everyone was writing about what would happen 100 years from now, the Hunger Games, Divergent. It was all about the future, how we were going to be separated into groups and pitted against each other. And then after that wave went over, I think what came back, and then more contemporary came. So it's this is contemporary and science fiction, contemporary and science fiction. I've heard a lot of agents say they want horror, they want scary books. That's a market that hasn't been done for young people. They want people to write books that are thrillers, that are mysteries. I think a good book will last forever. A catchy book will only last when the catchy theme is out. But if you write a really good book, it doesn't matter what you write about. If it's a book where the characters feel like you know them, when the scenes are vivid when you read them, when you can't put it down at night, when you want to keep reading it, and even though your eyes are bleeding and they hurt, but you can't stop reading it, that's a good book. And that book will sell no matter what it's about. So if you can write a book where you connect with the audience, with your readers, and it's strong, it doesn't matter what genre it is.
What program do you use for writing?
So I've used notes. You can describe your characters, and it puts things in different ways for you. It's like Microsoft Word for writing. It just is a format you download onto your laptop. They have a format for your phone, but it isn't as in depth as your computer or your laptop. So I use Scrivener, and I also just write. And I try to do outlines. I think one of the things that one of the mistakes I have made is I come up with good ideas, but I don't always make it strong enough that the reader will stay with me the whole time. You know, I've had agents want to read my whole book, and they like the first chapters, and then after a while they get like, oh, it's just, there's too much fluff in here, so you need to tighten this up more, you need to make this sharper. So I started doing outlines, and also having character arcs, where all my characters go through an experience, they learn things. They say your character should have a goal, and they should fail that goal twice, and then they achieve the goal towards the end of the book. And it sounds so cookie cutter, but because I'm writing, not self-publishing, I'm writing hoping to get the eye of that editor at that big publishing company. I have to write something they're comfortable with. You have to write something that they feel like I can sell. If you have a really outlandish idea or theme, unless you already have a strong base, like in that case, your website and your social media work. If you have a million followers, then they may take a look at you, even if they feel like your book is, whoa, no one's ever written a book like this before, but you show you have a readership, or you've been writing a blog about this topic for a decade, or you have a podcast, and everyone listens to your podcast, and look at how many viewers you have on your YouTube page. So that sometimes can help you if you have like a kind of outlandish idea. For the most part, though, every time I answer a question, I'm like, answer that question and 1,000 other questions. But to answer your question, which was, what format do I use, right? Is that your question? Format question?
What program do you
Oh, program, yes, Scrivener. I use Scrivener, which is an application on that you can buy. It's expensive in the sense that you can also just write on a sheet of paper. You can organize your thoughts on a computer without an application. So, yeah.
You mentioned that in publishing companies, sometimes you have to give up certain parts of the story idea.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to give up something significant that you felt was like a really important chunk to the story? And how'd you handle that, if that did happen?
So I haven't had to give up something significant in any of my novels I've written. And I sometimes I feel like no matter what you want to do, take it. It's yours. I just want to be published. But then there's parts of me like, I don't know, I couldn't change that. I mean, even with my critique partners, sometimes they say, sometimes people say drop a character. You have too many characters. A lot of publishers say, you have a bad guy and a somewhat bad guy. Drop the somewhat bad guy. Take those traits and move to the bad guy. Or, I've had people say, you don't need siblings. That person doesn't need siblings. No, I want them to have siblings. There's not so many characters in your book. And I have avoided that, using profanity or not using profanity. I have a character in one of my books where I feel like she uses bad language. I don't use bad language. I hope my kids don't use bad language at her age, but she just does it, and I can't imagine her any other way. So I know that, especially in America, some publishers don't want to see that. If you publish your book in Europe, you can get away with things you can't get away with in the U.S. I have people tell me, like Harry Potter, my kids read it, the British version, and there's so many bad words in that book. But if you read the American version, they take it all out. They don't say a lot of the things that Harry Potter and his friends say in the British version of the book. But for now, I haven't had to make that decision. In the work for hire projects I've done, I have given an idea and I've had the publisher say, yeah, I don't know. Or the illustrator said, or the illustrator wanted to do a different picture for that page, and I was like, we should try this. Like I wanted a cricket in the book, and they were like, no. And I was like, I was thinking the cricket can move throughout the story, and you're like, no, just don't use cricket. And I was like, okay, what's a book for kids? Like, no cricket. And I was like, okay, you're right, you're the publisher, no cricket. Unnecessary and an extra thing. But I saw a cricket. I envisioned a cricket in my story, and they were like, no crickets. So I did what they said because they had control. I think it would be harder if I got to the point where an agent said, cut out that parent, cut out that side character, completely reduce this thing. I mean, I wrote a book, which they say you never should do, with 3 different voices, like a multi-voice book. You can write, most of your first books are written in one person through the whole book. It's just one character in the whole book, their ideas, their thoughts the whole way through. And I did one with 3 different girls, and each chapter is a different girl's version of the story. And a lot of people told me, you're not gonna get published like that. Your first book can't be like that. That's too risky. First-time authors never publish a book with multiple characters. Cut those 2 characters out and only focus on this girl. I'm like, I can't focus on the girl who's kidnapped only because everyone else is doing something where she's kidnapped. And she doesn't know what they're doing. So I have to have multiple voices. So, you know, that's when you have to take your critique partner and you take what they say. Sometimes you take their word. Sometimes you say, hey, I'm going to take the risk and keep this part of my story for now. So we'll see if I made a bad decision. So I also have the book where it's one voice. So I'm trying to see which next time I go around. You know, there's also Twitter pitches. So in Twitter, they have pitch competitions, which are really popular now, where you write a book and you have to summarize your book in 280 characters or whatever it is now on Twitter. And then you, on that day, agents will read all the tweets and they will favorite the books they like. And then you can send them a query letter and say, you know, as you favorite my tweet at Twitter pitch party or whatever it is, tweet this day, here's my book. And it doesn't mean they're going to publish it, but it means that they liked what they saw in that tweet. So you have a door, a way in. So that works as well.
Do you use pictures artists
So in the books I published,
in your books?
in my books, yeah. So in the books that I published, they all have pictures because they're all for young people, and some of them I had to find the pictures, and some of them the publisher found the pictures, and I said, good picture here would be this person when they're a kid. A good picture here would be, in a book I wrote where there's some segregation in the book. Find a picture where there's the black only water fountain and the white only water fountain in America. Like, this is a good place for this picture. This is a good page for a chart, or this is a good page for a map. In the books that I'm writing, the novels, I have not written a graphic novel or anything with pictures. All the ideas I have have not had pictures. But what good point you make is that middle grade sometimes has pictures. Sometimes chapter books have pictures. So I'd love to explore that opportunity, but I wouldn't draw them myself because even though I want to be an artist, I'm not. So I would have to have someone else do that. And usually the publisher finds the artist for you. Sometimes you have a best friend, or you or someone is an illustrator and you come together with your idea, but most of the time they prefer to find the artist themselves within their in-house team of artists. There was a question in the back.
Yeah. What is your favorite author whose story maybe inspires you?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the kind of thing you should know how to answer before you come talk about publication. So, I mean, the first thing that came to mind is Toby Morrison. She recently died, but I love her books. She does not write necessarily for children, so that's, I like her books for me. For children, my favorite authors for like young adult and middle grade. Oh my goodness, there's so many people. I can pull up my phone and look at my Kindle and see all the books that I have. Yeah. There's just tons of people I really like. Do you have Goodreads? Goodreads is a website where people can rank the books they read and what they liked about them and summarize them. So I'm on Goodreads, and I used to. I don't do it as much anymore. Now I just put a star, like 4 stars, 5 stars. But I used to actually summarize the book and say what I liked and didn't like about a book. And then you can also look up your own books when you write. And when someone once told me, never look up your books on Goodreads, because you don't want to. It's going to make you feel sad. And it may make you feel happy. And I was like, well, I've only written a few. And I looked at my name once, and somebody was like, some people were like, good book, good book. One person was like, this book was too long, or it was too this or that. She gave me like a 3 instead of a 5. And I was like, oh. And it was only like one person in the whole world. And she doesn't know me, I don't know her, but so now I only go on Goodreads to review books that I've read. I put stars, I don't even write comments. Now that I know how hard it is to write a book, I don't even make comments like, good job writing your book. Either I liked it a lot and I do a review, or I don't like it at all. I don't finish reading books I don't like, so I don't even rate them. So, like, I can give you a list of books I like if you want to give me your email address, and I can go home and write them, but like right now I can't think of the authors.
How much published companies charge for an author?
Like how much they pay them? Oh, people don't usually talk about how much they make. With writing, I know with some of my work for hire stuff, it's between $1,200 to like $1,600 per book. Which for me is like a book I do in 3 months, because you don't get a lot of time to do those books. and there are books so long. So one day I was like, you know, if I did the math, I could do this the rest of my life. I mean, I could do this for a whole year and I could quit my job. And my husband was like, yeah, but how much of those books can you get done a day? I'm like, oh, you're right.
I want to ask how much percent of selling take
Yes.
published companies. So
Right, so
in general.
I think it's like less than 10% the author gets sometimes. Like it's, but if the book, you know, it's a $20 book and it's selling on bestseller list, you know, that's still a lot of money, 10% of all those sales worldwide. But the publisher takes the bulk of the money, I think. It may be more than 10%, but the agent gets a little bit, the publisher gets a little bit, the cover artist gets a little bit, the marketing team gets a little bit. Like all these people get a little bit. Maybe it's like 30, 40%, but and I can also look that up and email it to you later, but I've heard of advances being around $5,000 to $10,000 for books, and then royalty checks coming in every year or month at like $1,500 or $5,000. I mean, there are people who've written books that people said before anyone even read the book, and the general public, this is going to be amazing, and they got a 6-figure advance, so they got a 7-figure advance. Because the publisher felt this is going to be a movie, this is going to be a book, this is going to be a second book and a third book. So if you write that kind of book, then obviously the more money they make, the more money you get from the cut. But exactly how much each publishing company takes, I don't know. I think it's probably an average, but some of them take more, some take less. The smaller the company, maybe the less they take, but the less money you might make, because less distribution rights.